finding several complaints. They say that you do have a good relationship, but something really needs to be done immediately. I guess tell us about that relationship and what are you guys planning on doing?
Well, we do have a very good relationship with the association. We have discussed this matter on 2 or 3 occasions with the association, and we've both committed to compile some research, some best practices review surrounding what other police services are doing with social media. And we just received the results of our review on Friday, conducted by our strategic service area within the Regina Police Service. And we're just now in the process of reviewing what we've determined as a result of that review. We've received the results from 16 other police services in terms of what they do with social media. I think we all have to understand that social media is very much an evolving phenomenon, relatively new to public institutions and private institutions. And certainly there's a lot of really positive benefits that can be derived out of social media. But for whatever reason, it seems to also bring out, I think, a very dark side in our community and other communities. And but I do want to emphasize, I believe, that some of the comments, and we received many comments yesterday on our Facebook account that were hateful, to put it blunt, threatening, not only to our members, but our canine dogs as well. Bona fide threats that would actually would cross the line in terms of committing a criminal offense under threatening of the code. So we had, unfortunately, yesterday a pretty serious evolving concern around our first Facebook page. Later on in the evening, we decided to shut the page down. We tried with the resources that we had to try and control and monitor the number of posts that were being made. Quite frankly, we couldn't keep up, and quickly lost control effectively of what was being posted on the page. It's obviously very much of a concern for our members within the service. I too share that concern. Obviously we're endeavoring and we're very much committed to being very transparent and open as an organization, and we'll take criticism. We're not perfect from time to time. I don't think any organization is, and this isn't, the Facebook is one way to have a conversation with folks in the community and at least provide our perspective. However, we absolutely expect that it be respectful behavior. Profanity and hateful comments are not permitted with good reason. So, we have very strict policies that way. Yesterday was an example, though, where we couldn't keep up.
Do you think that that's because this was sort of like a targeted incident? Was it, the fact that it overwhelmed your staff? Was it, do you think there was a sense that it was a concentrated effort by individuals to do that?
Well, it's hard to say because they're anonymous posts for the most part, and so it's very difficult to know. Obviously, the incident involving the pit bull obviously stirs up emotions in the community. I think it does anytime there's an animal involved. It tends to stir up emotions throughout our country for sure, and I know beyond. What happened yesterday, I'm not quite sure. I can't explain it. Obviously, the association and its members and our members, myself included, very concerned with what we saw.
Is there a chance that you could put it? I know in the union brief they talked about a delay on Facebook that these somehow.
That doesn't exist.
Really? You can't.
Not for corporate or business accounts. From what I understand, it does with private accounts, but you cannot secure that type of technology right now because we've looked into it. What we have done is reconfigured our Facebook account that people cannot put posts on our Facebook wall unless it's associated to one of our threads or one of our previous postings.
How does that
So
solve
it-
the issue of comments, though?
Well, it restricts to some extent the accessibility to our Facebook account. It doesn't eliminate, obviously, feedback from the community, but does restrict those comments under the threads that we've posted. We're in a much better position, we believe, to monitor the activity on the account rather than having 30 or 40 conversations going on at the same time. We may have one or two under our threads. So it'll be much easier to monitor and contain and scrutinize when we're getting hateful or defamatory comments made towards members of our service.
Do you see this as a short-term plan, or is it something that you'll revisit later on?
Well, we'll revisit later on, but I can tell you it'll stand in place for some time.
Sometime meaning
Weeks, for
Are
sure.
you worried that it takes away some of the transparency that you were hoping to achieve with the public and not allowing them to post how they feel? Or
Well, they can still post. It's just not a free-for-all right now. Obviously, our goal was to be as transparent as we possibly could be. It's very, as I said at the outset, it's very unfortunate that a small, and I believe this to be a very small percentage of our overall population, and I also believe there's a high probability that a lot of these comments didn't even come from our own community. So it's representative of a small number of people, but the whole organization is very concerned. I'm very concerned, and it was way over the line.
are you going to
In
press
terms of
charge?
transparency, we're still committed to transparency. However, given what's happened, this was a move that I had predetermined early this morning after we met. We've been meeting for several hours on this issue this morning. And so we'll keep this policy in place. It's not that we're not accessible. We are. We're not as accessible as we were. We'll obviously monitor it over the next several weeks and make a determination whether or not we lift this. It's not, this isn't that uncommon, from what I understand, in other organizations to have these types of restrictions associated to their web pages for these very reasons. I don't think it serves our service well. I know it does not serve the community well when you see comments that are speaking to race or profanity when your children, we're all visiting these sites from time to time. It's not in the public's interest, it's not in the community's best interest to have posts of that nature that are so easily accessible we can't monitor it 24/7, we do not have the resources, and very few organizations do. So it's not something I don't think you want your children reading. I know I don't want my children having access to it. I know for a fact the overwhelming majority of our community does not like to see words like the F words and other words that are sitting on there. So all we're trying to do is just bring it in to some extent, still being accessible. We're one of the more accessible police services in the country. We've prided ourselves on our social media policy. We're still committed to that. But given the experience, I'm confident and I'm very comfortable with my decision to rein it in to some extent.
So just for clarity,
yeah.
so how do you rein in these threads? I mean, if you couldn't you conceivably have had an earlier thread from a couple of months ago that was abusive, and wouldn't those people still have access to posts and such?
Yeah, what it does do is, though, rather than having, which we experienced yesterday, maybe 20 or 30 postings that all had their own dimensions associated to those conversations, as one person trying to monitor all of those conversations, it can't be done. Physically can't be done. It's too much going on at any given time. With restricting the number of threads that are active at any given time, then our media section folks only have to concentrate on maybe 2 or 3 different threads rather than as many as 20 or 30 or more, with all levels of activity associated underneath each thread.
Okay, so you're not blocking anyone, but you're,
No.
but you're narrowing their
funneling
little
it
sort of,
into-
entry point into it.
into tighter silos. That would be very accurate to describe it that way.
Why don't you block people if someone uses the F word on your site?
We do.
So you block that?
Well,
person
we do have
immediately?
filters that automatically block profanity. It's not perfect, but we do, and we don't see a lot of profanity, but and we do if they're abusing our site, depending on the nature. Sometimes they're given a cautionary note or two, but if it's way over the top and threatening, they're banned from our site.
So how long are you gonna narrow these entry points then?
Well, we're going to keep that policy in place for at least, I would suggest, at least 3 to 4 weeks. And we'll monitor the activity on the site after that. And we'll make a determination whether we want to continue with what we're doing today or make a change in the future.
So is there one person monitoring this? Is that-
Typically,
Like
yeah.
Kylie, is that you?
It's,
And so what can Kylie do, technically can someone explain how that would work? I mean, how,
well, she'll be able to monitor the sites. Kylie, I must admit, I'm not a total expert in Facebook, so I will allow you to provide some comments to that question if you could, please.
Sorry, so your question is?
well, I mean,
how do I do
so
it?
how many could you monitor? I mean, how stringently or diligently could you monitor 2 or 3 or however? I mean, what do you, like one at a time I mean, how does it, explain how it works?
So the issue last night, or the issue with the sheer volume of posts, is that by the time one feed is monitored with its anywhere from 30 to 600 comments, there'd be 2 or 3 more threads with 30 to 40 to getting to 200 comments each time. So every time the page refreshes, there's 2 or 3 more conversations that have to be monitored for profanity, for hate speech, for posts inciting violence. So for one person to monitor, it's incredibly difficult just because it multiplies while you're not refreshing the page. Every time you hit
And so what
refresh.
happens now?
So now the posts are limited to not public posts, so they can reply to our posts. So the Regina Police Service will always be the original posters for the next 3 to 4 weeks until we review it. Then after that we can decide something different. But right now the Regina Police Service are the ones that create the posts. People can reply. They can ask questions. They can voice concerns. They can ask about different things that are going on in their community.
But what if they hurl some F-bomb at you on a reply? Can you keep that from going on the page or
Yeah,
what?
we have pretty good spam filters. Our spam filters have an impressive array of swears, misspelled in impressive number of ways. So those are targeted automatically. They don't appear on our page until we go in and review them. Just the swear posts. We can also add things like racial slurs, things like hate speech. We can add those words to our spam filters as well, and then those are sectioned out as well.
I wonder if you fear any reprisals if you sort of narrow this entry point for 4 weeks and then you open it up in the 5th week and suddenly people are like, they got all those pent up frustration toward the police service and it just continues again.
Well, there's always a venue to express frustration with our police service. That's why we have these accounts.
Right,
So
but
we're
if you
not.
withhold
So we're
it-
not.
But if you limit the access
Yeah.
for 4 weeks and then.
Well,
and then you
it
open
may.
it-
What I consider this is probably, we're talking the smallest percentiles of our community that are abusing sites. And we're not, this conversation I'm having, I'm confident if you talk to each one of your respective managers, your respective broadcast stations, same types of issues. I monitor all kinds of different sites, and I've seen all kinds of what I consider to be very, very hateful, very poor comments in many respects, either inciting people towards violence, being racially intolerant, being intolerant to those in the gay and lesbian society community, rather, for example.
Do you identify
Those
any of those
comment-
people on your pages?
Those comments are not acceptable, and our organization is going through what I consider to be, this conversation today is occurring, I would suggest, in many, many other boardrooms and other institutions, not only throughout Canada, but throughout the world. And we're all struggling, I think, as executive leaders within our respective associations to try and strike a balance, to be as transparent, to be as open as possible, and that's our commitment. However, it's obviously, as proven once again, any system or any method of communication can be abused. And there are, as I said at the outset, I do want to emphasize, social media has a lot of good features to it. It has opened up a lot of doors of communication with folks we wouldn't be able to have a conversation with, and solicit concerns or feedback if they think we're not doing enough traffic enforcement, or we're not in a school zone, or we should be directing more of our energy one way. That's what we're about. We're about harnessing and gathering these concerns. It's very unfortunate that we're talking, I think, a handful of people to use it as an opportunity to be nothing but mean-spirited, hateful, and vindictive, or whatever reason they're carrying this. It's not about concerns about our police service. These are out-and-out attacks on the character of our people in our organization, which I will not tolerate, because we have good people here. And it's an out-and-out attack on our institution and what our institution stands for, and I have total confidence in our institution and what it stands for. And it's very unfortunate that a small handful of people, once again, because we've seen this time and time again in social media, have used this as an opportunity to be nothing but counterproductive for any cause. So it's not that we're shutting the doors down on social media again. We're working with the association. I fully appreciate the association's concern. We share the same concern for all of our members. So we're going to work together with the association and our police service and find our way through trying to strike a balance that protects our service, protects our community against comments that are threatening and insightful and hateful, and yet try and be absolutely as transparent as we possibly can. And that's our commitment to the community.
So if there were some things that snuck through on the weekend that had hate speech or threats of violence towards officers, are those actionable? Like, is there any avenue to pursue charges against people who have posted those things?
You know, that's something we haven't considered yet. We've been working obviously feverishly on policy and trying to strike a balance, obviously going forward. But you know, I haven't received and I haven't looked at all of the comments, but I wouldn't rule that out. That obviously we'll look at that. I think it's often very difficult through social media to determine the source, but it's something that we may look into depending on the severity of it.
Why is it difficult to determine the source? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Why is it difficult to determine the source? If Kevin Smith posts something, Kevin Smith posted it, why would it be difficult to determine who's...
Yeah, it depends on if they're using their own account, and there's other complexities associated to it. So it's not always that simple. So I think the message, obviously people need to be held accountable, but obviously the message is that we want to try and make some modifications in terms of what we're doing here as a police service with social media, striking that balance that I identified.
Are you able to release any details of the specifics of the case on Saturday?
Well, we did, certainly you have an update. You're talking about the officer-involved shooting
Yeah.
at the Pitfall?
I was just wondering because there seems to be really conflicting accounts from
Certainly.
some of the witnesses you've spoken to and from will there be any sort of, I know
Well,
you said there's an investigation.
Yeah, we're doing an internal investigation, as we always do. Anytime there's an officer-involved shooting, there's an immediate investigation that's commenced. That investigation will be in conjunction with the Use of Force Board and overseen by the Deputy Chief. So that investigation is obviously in motion. Of course, the concerned members in the community that have expressed concern over the incident, we would obviously encourage them to step forward and launch a complaint. To my knowledge, At this time, there has not been a complaint lodged. I phoned, actually, we contacted the PCC, the Public Complaints Commission, and asked them if they would deem this to be a public complaint, and they advised us they would need the complainant to come forward. So we've taken steps to obviously be as forthright and I think trying to be proactive with the Public Complaints Commission. We've, like I say, we brought that to their attention, that this is out in the community. So to my knowledge, at this time, as I mentioned, we have not received a complaint from anyone in the community, directed a formal complaint. So without that formal complaint, it's difficult. We can't have the PCC do a complaint on their basis, but the Public Complaints Commission will review the use of force that was used. They'll review our use of force investigation. But it's somewhat different than a public complaint investigation, because a public complaint investigation requires a complainant, an actual complainant, to come forward. And that has not been the case so far.
Is there any concern, though, if it's an internal investigation, if it is a case of he said, and the investigation is being conducted by police, would there be a bias towards believing the police account of things versus the homeowner?
Well, that's why I mean, if there is a concern in the community, that's why we always strongly encourage people to come forward and make a complaint, so we can get their side of the story. But I can tell you, based on what I've reviewed on this incident, I believe the officers, based on the information I have, the officers acted appropriately and were afforded no other opportunities. It's unfortunate that these things happen. I don't think anybody wanted this to happen, but our job is challenging at times, and we're placed into circumstances that one couldn't reasonably foresee or predict without the benefit of hindsight. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Had you known what may happen, had you known how it was going to unfold, you may have done things differently. I'm not suggesting that was the case, but they didn't. They didn't, given the fact they were in hot pursuit of what they thought was a very serious assault of suspects. They were engaged in trying to protect our community and hold someone to account for committing a very serious assault. Made a decision based on what I consider to be very reasonable grounds to enter the yard. Unfortunately, they weren't aware of what they were going to see and be confronted with the dog. So they had every reason to be in there. They were fulfilling their duty. They were acting in good faith. And like I say, it's unfortunate. No one, I don't believe there's a police officer I know in our service that signs up so they can discharge their weapon ever. That's not why we're here. But we do have a difficult job to do, and at times, unfortunately, we're confronted with situations that require an immediate response to preserve life.
Was there anyone?
Sorry?
Were any of the officers injured, or was it the threat of potential?
They weren't injured, although they were certainly engaged. They were both on the ground, and the dog was, by what I've been advised, was becoming very aggressive towards them. They tried to intervene in terms of trying to get the two dogs apart, and the pit bull, and they weren't successful, and both of them ended up falling during the struggle, and were in a very difficult position, I would suggest.
So they weren't bitten or anything?
They were not bitten.
What about the police dog?
It didn't sustain any serious injuries.
Was anyone found on the premises related to the assault?
No, not yet. That investigation is still continuing.
So to clarify, to form or to get any further investigation, a public complaint has to be made in order for the review panel to...
Well, we'll conduct our own review, including asking for a statement from those that witnessed the event. So that that investigation will take place. We'll try and secure all of the evidence that's available. It's really a matter of process and procedure, because then it is a internal review, which will still be vetted by the Public Complaints Commission. Anytime there's a discharge, the file goes to them to ensure that it's done thoroughly,